Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey there, Herman and Corn. So the other day, I was having a call with a client on the telephone. The phone, when you actually have a phone call with someone, not through WhatsApp or a Zoom call. Usually, I'm doing Google Meets or Zooms for kind of business-related meetings. And for the kind of work that I've been doing for a long time, technical projects where you're getting briefed on something by a team, recording is, I think, often encouraged as a best practice. And I've personally found it tremendously helpful because it creates a record of the conversation. You might forget or you might mishear something or can't remember exactly what someone says. It's actually becoming slightly less useful with the advent of AI transcription because it's easier, more convenient to listen to just to read a transcript. But even then, sometimes you're not sure if the transcript is right. So recording on Zoom calls, etc., happens all the time, and I don't think anyone bats an eye so long as they get that little notification. On the phone, it's less transparent, but certainly there are times that I've recorded phone calls when you might be speaking to a journalist. You want to make sure that you're quoted accurately, or a bank or something that you think might have legal importance. Now, Israel's a really strange country in many respects, including in the legal. In some respects, it has a very limited view of personal civil rights in the traditional, maybe more American sense of the word. And in other instances, it's quite permissive. And regarding this law here, I would say it's probably in the more permissive side. I used to be more familiar with things like defamation law when I was more involved in writing stuff, and it's just something kind of, if you're doing journalism, most people have a passing knowledge of. In that respect, it's very, very strict. But for recording, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not mistaken, the law is that you don't need the other person's formal consent, even though it's good manners and courtesy and etiquette to say, do you mind if I record this call? And usually that's fine, but it's just legally that's not a requirement, with a few exceptions. But I noticed, and this is sorry that it, as usual, takes me a long time to get around to what I wanted to ask. This feature has vanished from Android. There was definitely somewhere in the menu or record this call button that disappeared. So I Googled it. I thought it was something maybe I'd, hadn't configured it on my phone. And it turns out that it was deliberate, or OnePlus removed it because it was a European requirement to do so. And I guess when they're selling stuff into Israel, it's probably a lot of stock is coming through the European models. So that was taken out. And I looked into any workarounds for this because it struck me, if I'm working on my phone more, it's a big problem. If you have a client meeting on WhatsApp, there's no way to record it. So that's the case. And it got me wondering, well, when I looked this up, I got information about wiretapping. I was like, what, isn't wiretapping like what the feds do when they're, trying to catch a criminal? And in some countries, it's protected or even legislated for under that same, sometimes very old statutes. So what I'd love to hear your thoughts about, Herman and Corn, is this push to ban this recording. And I think it's an interesting question regarding the ways different countries approach consent to recording phone conversations, whether the other party needs to whether it's totally banned, totally allowed. There's, of course, if you look at something as broad as law, you'll find many different permutations. But we talk about privacy and technology a lot, so I thought it was a topic worth discussing. What is law? 2025 for this. 2026. There you go. I'm losing my mind.
You ever have that feeling where you go to use a tool that's been in your pocket for years, and suddenly it's just gone? Like, you reach for the screwdriver in your drawer and find out the manufacturer remotely turned it into a spoon?
That is a very specific and slightly terrifying analogy, corn. But I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm Herman Poppleberry, and today we're diving into the disappearing act of the call recording button.
It's funny you mention the disappearing act. Our housemate Daniel was just telling us about this. He was trying to record a briefing for a technical project. You know, the kind where someone's rattling off specs and you really don't want to miss a single decimal point. And he realized the feature was just gone from his phone.
Yeah, he was saying his OnePlus phone used to have it right there in the dialer, and now it's vanished. And it's not just him. This is part of a massive global shift in how our devices handle privacy, consent, and the very nature of a conversation.
It's a great prompt from Daniel because it touches on so many things we've talked about before. In episode 202, we looked at how our data is sold, but this is almost the opposite. This is about our ability to capture our own data, our own conversations, and how the gatekeepers are basically saying, no, you can't do that anymore.
Exactly. It's the intersection of legal liability and technological control. We're looking at a world in 26 where the simple act of recording a phone call has become a minefield of regional laws and platform restrictions.
So, let's set the stage. Why is this happening now? I mean, call recording has been around since tape recorders were a thing. Why are the smartphone giants suddenly so allergic to it?
It's a combination of two things: the complexity of global compliance and the way mobile operating systems are designed. If you're Google or Apple, you're selling the same software in 100 different countries. In some places, like Israel where we are, the law is relatively permissive. In others, like Germany or certain states in the United States, it's incredibly strict.
Right. And rather than trying to build a feature that perfectly obeys the laws of every single jurisdiction, which sounds like a nightmare, they're just cutting the cord.
Precisely. It's easier to ban the feature than to be the one responsible when someone uses it illegally. But before we get into the tech side, we should probably look at the legal landscape, because that's what's driving the engineering decisions.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Most people have heard the terms one-party consent and all-party consent, but I think there's a lot of confusion about what they actually mean in practice.
It's the fundamental divide. One-party consent means that as long as you are a part of the conversation, you can record it without telling anyone else. You are the one person who consents. This is the federal law in the United States and the law in many other places, including Israel.
And then you have the two-party or all-party consent states, which is a bit of a misnomer, right? Because if there are 5 people on the call, you need all 5.
Right. California, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, they require everyone on the line to know and agree. And here's where it gets tricky for the tech companies. If I'm in a one-party state like New York and I call you in an all-party state like California, which law applies?
I'm guessing the stricter one.
Usually, yes. Courts have often ruled that the person in the stricter jurisdiction is the one who needs protection. So, if you're a developer, how do you handle that? Do you use GPS to check the location of both callers in real time? Do you check their area codes? Area codes don't mean anything anymore. I've had the same number for 15 years regardless of where I live.
That's a great point. The technology to reliably enforce consent across borders is actually really difficult to build. But wait, we record Zoom calls all the time. We record Google Meet sessions. Why is it okay there but not on a standard phone call?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer is mostly historical and regulatory. Phone calls are often governed by old wiretapping laws, the kind of stuff Daniel mentioned in his prompt. These laws were written when a wiretap meant literally clipping a device onto a physical copper wire.
Right, the stuff of old spy movies.
Exactly, but internet-based communication, voice over IP, often falls under different categories. Plus, on a Zoom call, there's usually a giant notification that says this meeting is being recorded. It's transparent. The problem with smartphone call recording is that it's often invisible.
So the push from the manufacturers is basically an attempt to force transparency.
In a way, yes. If you look at the history of Android, which is what Daniel was asking about, it's been a slow squeeze. Back in the early days, you could just download a third-party app and it worked. Then Google started blocking the ability to record the audio stream directly from the hardware.
I remember that. People started complaining that the apps only recorded their own voice, but the other person sounded like they were at the bottom of a well.
That's because the app was literally just using the phone's microphone to pick up the sound coming out of the earpiece. It was a hack. Then, in 2022, Google made a huge move. They banned apps on the Play Store from using the Accessibility API for call recording.
The Accessibility API? Why were they using that?
It was a workaround. The accessibility tools are designed to help people with disabilities by giving apps deep access to the system like reading text on the screen or capturing audio for transcription. Developers realized they could use that same access to grab call audio. Google said no, that's a security risk, and they shut it down.
So now, in 26, if you want to record a call on a modern Android phone, you're basically stuck with whatever the manufacturer gave you in the box. And like Daniel found out, many of them are just removing it entirely to stay safe in the European market.
Right. If you're OnePlus or Samsung and you want to sell a phone that works across the European Union, it's much safer to just disable the feature than to risk a massive fine under the General Data Protection Regulation.
It feels like a loss for the consumer, though. I mean, think about the use cases. Not just Daniel's technical briefings, but people dealing with insurance companies, or tenants talking to difficult landlords, or journalists.
It's a huge loss for accountability. There's this concept in tech called the analog hole. It's the idea that no matter how much digital protection you put on something, if a human can hear it or see it, they can record it.
You mean just putting the phone on speaker and using a second recorder?
Exactly. That's the low-tech workaround that will never go away. But it's clunky, it's not elegant, and it doesn't give you the metadata, the time, the date, the verified number that makes a recording useful in a legal or professional context.
So what's the alternative? If the built-in dialers are stripping this out, where's the technology going?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and a little bit ironic. While the manufacturers are banning audio recording, they are leaning hard into AI transcription.
Wait, so I can't record the audio of the call, but my phone can listen to it and write down everything we say.
In many cases, yes. We're seeing a shift toward on-device AI that creates a text log of the conversation. And because it's text, and because the audio isn't being saved as a playable file, some companies argue it falls into a different legal bucket.
That feels like a very thin legal distinction.
It is, but it's the direction the industry is moving. Think about the Pixel phones. They have features that can screen your calls or transcribe them in real time. The audio might be processed and then discarded, leaving you with just the transcript.
But isn't a transcript still a record of the conversation? If I record you saying something without your consent, does it matter if it's a WAV file or a text file?
Legally, in many jurisdictions, it's the same thing. It's the capture of the communication. But from a user experience perspective, it's much easier for a company to say, we're providing a productivity tool, not a wiretapping device.
I wonder if this connects back to what we talked about in episode 236 regarding error correction and data integrity. If we're relying on AI transcripts instead of audio recordings, we're introducing a new layer of potential error. An AI might mishear a number or a name, and if the original audio is gone, you have no way to verify it.
That's a brilliant connection, Corn. We're trading accuracy for compliance. Daniel mentioned that sometimes he's not sure if the transcript is right, and that's why he wants the audio. If an AI transcribes 50,000 as 15,000, that's a massive problem in a technical brief.
So, we have this weird landscape in 26. On one hand, the hardware and software giants are locking the doors. On the other hand, AI is opening a window, but the window has a bit of a blurry view.
And then you have the third-party services. There are still apps and services that work by using a three-way call. You call their server calls the person you want to talk to, and the server records the whole thing.
I've seen those. They usually cost a monthly subscription, right?
Yeah, and they're often used by lawyers and journalists. Because the recording is happening on a remote server, not on the phone itself, it bypasses all those Android and iOS restrictions. But it's another step, another cost, and another privacy risk. Now a third-party company has a recording of your entire conversation.
It's the classic privacy trade-off. To get the feature you want, you have to trust yet another entity with your data.
Exactly. And let's not forget the hardware solutions. There are now these little Bluetooth devices. They look like credit cards or small pucks that pair with your phone and record the audio directly from the Bluetooth stream.
I've seen those. They're actually becoming quite popular again. It's like we've gone full circle back to the physical tape recorder, just with better chips.
It's the only way to be truly platform independent. If Apple or Google changes their API tomorrow, your Bluetooth recorder still works because it's just a headset as far as the phone is concerned.
So, if I'm a listener and I'm frustrated like Daniel is, what are my actual options right now? If I'm in a place where it's legal but my phone won't let me do it, what do I do?
Well, first, you have to know your local laws. We are not lawyers, and this is not legal advice. But generally speaking, if you're in a one-party consent area, you have a few paths. One is the hardware route we just mentioned. A dedicated Bluetooth call recorder is the most reliable way to get high-quality audio without fighting your phone's operating system.
And the second?
The second is moving the conversation off the traditional phone network. If you use Signal, or WhatsApp, or Telegram, or even Zoom, you can often find ways to record those sessions using screen recording tools or built-in features. The traditional cellular voice network is the most regulated and restricted space.
That's interesting. So the old school phone call is actually the most difficult place to record, while the modern data-based apps are a bit more of a Wild West.
Precisely. Because the cellular network is treated as a public utility in many countries, it's subject to all these legacy telecommunications laws. An app like Signal is just data.
But wait, I thought screen recording on iPhones and most Androids automatically mutes the audio if you're in a call.
It does. That's another one of those system-level blocks. Apple specifically prevents the screen recorder from capturing audio during a phone call or a FaceTime call. They are very, very consistent about this.
So even on the apps, the operating system is still trying to be the gatekeeper.
It is. Which brings us back to the speakerphone and the second device. It's the only foolproof way, but it's a sad state of affairs when our hyper-advanced 26 technology forces us back to a method from 1970.
It really highlights the shift in who owns our devices. We bought the hardware, but we don't control the features. It's that old argument about the right to repair, but for software, the right to use our own hardware's capabilities.
And it's only going to get more complex. There's a push in some jurisdictions to mandate a beep, a periodic tone that tells the other person they are being recorded.
Oh, I remember that from old office phones.
Right. Some versions of the Android dialer in certain regions have started reintroducing that. If you hit record, a voice literally says, "This call is now being recorded."
Which, to be fair, solves the consent problem immediately. If they stay on the line after hearing that, they've consented.
True, but it also changes the dynamic of the conversation. If you're a journalist trying to get a candid quote, or if you're someone trying to document harassment, that notification might end the conversation before it even starts.
That's a really tough balance. On one hand, you have the right to not be recorded without your knowledge. On the other hand, you have the right to protect yourself and have a record of your own life.
It's a fundamental tension. And what's happening is that the big tech companies are siding with the most restrictive laws to minimize their own risk. They are choosing the path of least legal resistance, which often means the path of least utility for the user.
It's a form of regulatory arbitrage, but in reverse. Instead of moving to the place with the fewest rules, they are applying the strictest rules to everyone.
Exactly. It's simpler for their global supply chain. But it creates these weird pockets of frustration for people like Daniel, who live in a place where what they want to do is perfectly legal, but their device won't let them do it because of a law in a country 3,000 miles away.
So, we've talked about the legal side and the tech side. What about the future? Where does this go in the next few years? Are we just going to accept that phone calls are ephemeral and unrecordable?
I think we're going to see a divergence. For the average consumer, yes, the phone call will become something that leaves no trace. But for the professional, the toolset is going to move entirely into the cloud. We're going to see more people using virtual phone numbers, services like Google Voice or specialized business VoIP providers that handle recording at the server level.
So your phone just becomes a terminal for a much more powerful system, living in a data center somewhere.
Exactly. And that system will have all the compliance bells and whistles. It will know where you are, it will know the law, and it will play the necessary warnings or ask for the necessary button presses. It'll be legal as a service.
Legal as a service. That sounds like a very 26 kind of phrase.
It's where everything is going, Corn. But I do worry about the everyday person. The person who doesn't have a corporate VoIP system but needs to record a call with their insurance adjuster who is trying to back out of a claim. Those are the people who are being left behind by this push for sanitized, risk-free technology.
It's that loss of the individual's power to hold larger entities accountable. If the insurance company is recording you, which they always are, for quality and training purposes, right? But you can't record them. That's a massive power imbalance.
That is a huge point. They always have the record. You don't. They can go back and listen to exactly what you said to find a reason to deny your claim, but you have to rely on your memory or a scribbled note. It's an asymmetric information war.
So the ban on call recording isn't just a privacy feature. In practice, it can be a tool for institutional power.
I think that's a very fair way to look at it. Even if the intentions of the engineers at Google or Apple are purely about protecting privacy, the second-order effect is that it protects the powerful from being held to their word by the individual.
This is why I love these prompts. It starts with a missing button on a OnePlus and ends with the fundamental power dynamics of modern society.
It's all connected. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. If you're like Daniel and you're doing technical writing, the takeaway is, don't trust your phone's built-in tools. If the information is critical, use a dedicated recording device or move the call to a platform that you control.
And maybe double-check those AI transcripts. As we've seen, they can be incredibly helpful, but they aren't a substitute for the actual source of truth.
Definitely. Trust, but verify. And maybe keep an old-school digital recorder in your desk drawer, just in case.
The analog whore saves the day again.
It always does.
Well, this has been a fascinating look into something I think a lot of us have noticed but didn't quite realize the scale of. It's not just a glitch, it's a global policy shift.
It really is. And it's one of those things where the technology is moving faster than the law and the corporations are stuck in the middle trying to play it safe.
Which usually means the user loses a feature.
Sadly, yes. But hey, at least we still have our voices. For now.
Don't give them any ideas, Herman.
Fair point.
Well, if you've been enjoying these deep dives, whether you're recording them or just listening in the moment, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and join our little community of the curious.
It really does. We love seeing the feedback. And a big thanks to Daniel for sending this one in. It's been on my mind for a while, and it was great to finally dig into the guts of it.
Absolutely. If you want to get in touch or find our back catalogue, check out my weirdprompts.com. We've got all the episodes there, including the ones we mentioned today, like episode 236.
And we're on Spotify, of course.
Alright, I think that's a wrap for today. I'm Corn.
And I'm Herman Poppleberry.
Thanks for listening to my weird prompts. We'll catch you in the next one.
Until next time.
You know, I was thinking about that beep tone thing. What if we just started making the beep ourselves during calls? Just to be safe?
You want to just go beep every 30 seconds?
I mean, it would be a great way to see if people are actually paying attention.
Or a great way to make sure no one ever calls you again.
Also a win in my book, Herman. Also a win.
Touché, brother. Touché.
Anyway, let's go see if Daniel's found a workaround yet. I think I saw him eyeing my old Olympus recorder earlier.
Oh, he's definitely going to borrow it.
As long as he doesn't record me complaining about the dishes.
Too late, Corn, too late.
See ya, everyone.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.